The title of my paper is Reflections on Religion, Peace, and Politics. Many years ago, the American sociologist C. Wright Mills argued that when a problem is not only confined to an individual's life, but it touches upon the lives of many others too, then that is not a personal problem, but a social problem. In other words, when a problem hits as many as possible at the same time, then we can't talk about it as though it's only a personal problem. On the contrary, we should then realize that the problem has got various different dimensions. And it has turned into a multifaceted social problem which should be seen in a wider historical context. The problem of Shiism and Sunnism and conflicts in the region which have taken sectarian dimensions seem to qualify to be considered in the Millsian sense as a social problem with tremendous global reach. In other words, the sectarian conflicts have the capacity to flame the whole region and the entire Muslim world, and they wouldn't be comprehensible if we don't take into consideration the historical currents which have made these conflicts possible today. Let me explain myself in a better fashion. There are at least two broad views in regard to existing conflicts between Sunnites and Shiites. The first view is that there are no substantial differences between these two groups, and if we see conflicts between them, they are fabricated and inserted by colonial and imperial forces from without. The second view is that there are substantial differences between the Shiite interpretation of Islam and the Sunnite interpretations of Islam. The first position is called the external perspective, which projects all the ills in the Muslim world to external elements and factors without looking at social, political, cultural, religious, economic, educational, and theological issues which could shape the contours of human reality in a fundamental fashion. The second position is called the internal perspective, which ascribes all the ills in the Muslim world to subjective domains of human existence, without realizing that the human mind doesn't operate in a vacuum, but it is shaped and formed as well as reformed within the parameters of society, which itself is part of wider world systems at a given time in the course of history of humanity. To put it differently, it's not deniable that the Muslim world is a cultural reality that has lost its political significance as it had before the arrival of colonial armies from Europe. From a Western perspective, colonialism is a historical past which students of humanities and social sciences read when they pass their history lessons. But from a non-Western point of departure, colonialism is a legacy that Muslims are still wrestling with its disastrous consequences today. However, it would be a mistake to reduce all the ills which have encompassed the region into external factors such as imperialism, colonialism, and Western interventionism. By traveling around the Muslim world for the past 20 years, I have come to realize that the problems which we are encountered by are not exclusively of external nature. On the contrary, they are rooted in the soil of our own cultural mores, ideas, belief systems, and worldviews. Allow me to deconstruct the two major concepts which I am supposed to problematize, i.e. Shiism and Sunnism. It would be a mistake to consider these terms as ideologies in the way we talk about socialism versus liberalism or conservatism versus anarchism. Today, these terms have become a way of drawing national or ethnical identities among Muslims around the world, as religions have also become identity labels. A critical approach to these concepts may assist us to understand that they have not been understood always in this fashion. On the contrary, by a cursory look at history in the Muslim world, we can find instances that these concepts were not identity labels of national or ethnical kinds. For instance, the pretext by which the master of Abu Rayhan, Biruni, was killed at the hands of Mahmud Ghaznavi in the 10th century was his Shiite inclinations. But in the 10th century, to be a Shiite didn't mean that Abdus Samad Hakim followed an Imamite school of jurisprudence as most Shiites do today. On the contrary, it meant that Abdus Samad Hakim and Abu Rayhan Biruni were ardent followers of aql, i.e. intellect and reason, in their scientific pursuits. In other words, they disagreed with Ash'arites in matters of religion, philosophy, worldview, science, politics, aesthetics, and all that matters in human life. Today we have lost touch with the ontology of truth and instead have become interested in the politics of identity, and hence Shiism and Sunnism are not any more perspectives which could assist us in finding the truth of religion and a roadmap which could demonstrate to us how to erect a sane society. In other words, by the triumph of the Ash'arite ideology, the role of intellect has lost its pivotal role in the constitution of self and society in the Muslim world, and people came to believe that revelation enables us to do without reason as well as intellect. Of course, this has been the case in most areas of the Muslim world where Al-Ghazal's or Imam Ghazali, the incoherence of the philosophers, marked a major turn in their worldview. Although Al-Ghazal was an Iranian, but his ideas didn't fare very well in Iran due to the efforts of an Abyssinian philosopher, i.e. Khaja Nasir Tusi, who happened to be from the same region as Al-Ghazal in Khurasan. In other words, the Shiite interpretation of religion came to be very much in favor of reason, in contrast to the Sunnite perspective, which came to be Al-Ghazalian since 12th century onward. But this is not the whole story, as the Shiite world after the establishment of the Safavid Empire came to be struck by a literalist movement which came to be known as Akhbarit, i.e. those who argued that we should keep the boundaries of religion within the parameters of hadith which have come to us through the infallibles. In other words, the dynamic of life should be frozen within the boundaries of naql or tradition in its pristine form. Although they were defeated by another school which came to be known as usulites, or those who accept the role of reason next to the other sources of Islamic tradition, but the spirit of literalism put its indelible scars on the Shiite mind, as did the Akhbarism in the Sunnite context. However, the disasters which came to encompass the Muslim world was not confined only to the precious realm of intellect, but by the dawn of modernity and establishment of system of the nation state, the significance of Sufism declined too, for the reason that the state in modern context doesn't allow vigilantly any parallel loyalty to the one which is provided by the Leviathan. In other words, the idea of modern state is built upon submission to the will of the sovereign, and in one realm two or several sovereigns cannot live side by side. The Sufi orders are established on the idea of wilaya, or spiritual authority, which conditions those who follow the master to submit to the authority of the pir. Nevertheless, in the Muslim world, in which despotism is not only a political reality, but also a cultural phenomenon, the modern dictators couldn't tolerate any competitor who could possibly mobilize the masses against their ruthless rule. Thus, Sufism as a substantial way of life did depart from the public square, and this paved the way for a fundamentalist interpretation of religion in the absence of reason and love. In other words, Sufism was not only an esoteric interpretation of religion, but it was also the historical reservoir of how to coexist with others who may not share the same belief systems as ours. For instance, at the door of Abul Hasan Kharaghani's convent was written the following: "Whoever enters this convent, do feed them, and do not ask about their faith. For if they deserve life by the Almighty, certainly they do deserve to have a piece of bread at the table of Abul Hassan." End of quote. This approach to the other bred a sense of libertarian spirit in the fabric of Islamic civilization, which were widespread across the Muslim world prior to modernity. In other words, the internal factors minimized the role of intellect in the Muslim world, and the external factors, such as modern system of state, rooted out the institutions of Sufism across the Muslim world. For instance, there are many stories about how Kemal Ataturk and the Young Turks demolished Sufi shrines across Turkey, or how Sufi orders have been under pressures in other parts of the Muslim world. To put it differently, if we agree that philosophy is the manifestation of reason and Sufism is the expression of peace and love, then how would we interpret their departures from the public life? To me, it seems that fundamentalism, extremism, sectarianism, and all excessive movements in the region are due to the absence of reason and love, which have paved the way for emergence of one-dimensional interpretation of religiosity. Needless to argue that Muslims seem to insist upon visible religiosity in their societies, and the political expression of this will is called political Islam or Islamism. However, this insistence should be balanced by a democratic inclination, and the dilemma lies in the absence of democracy, which inflames extremism among Muslims. Many think that Islamism is equal or synonymous to Islam, but this is only a solipsist illusion. Islamism is a modern ideology which has been constructed on modern basis by serving the new church that is called state. There is no doubt the future of the Muslim world belongs to Islamism, and all other forms of governance, such as royalism, autocracy, etc., are doomed to disappear. But the burning question is, what form of Islamism is desirable and more in tune with democratic spirit of social organization? Last but not least, our problem is that we have lost our forefathers' tradition, but we have not yet learned modern traditions. In other words, sectarian conflicts, extremist violence, and excessive acts of brutalities demonstrate clearly that we do not know how to live with each other and with our differences in love, peace, and harmony. As Rumi says, love asks us to enjoy our life, for nothing good can come of death. Who is alive, I ask? Those who are born of love. Seek us in love itself. Seek love in us ourselves. Sometimes I venerate love, sometimes it venerates me. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.